Greetings and welcome to my virtual Life Organizing 101. My name is Kate Wirt. I'm a licensed social worker, professional organizer, founder and owner of Moxie Life Organizing. Real quick, today we're going to be talking about life organizing, and while we will focus heavily on the home, I do want to let you know that a lot of this is going to be able to apply to other aspects of your life. A little bit about my company. I run a full service organizing and coaching company. As you can see, we have an array of services. And if you're watching this and you've been struggling with organizing, I want you to know that you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there struggling, and that's part of the reason why I crafted a team of compassionate women ready to help. So I joke around that my job sometimes entails putting up a pantry, but it can go all the way to, unpacking or packing for a move. We offer those relocation services. We even offer hoarding help in the community. Some of my partners down there, you can see I'm a member of the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. I also have a social work heart, so we have a connection now with Area Agency on Aging with the support of Kent County Senior Millage. So we're able to service some of the seniors in West Michigan that are struggling in their homes to increase comfort and accessibility. We also work with the city and Kent County Health Department to address safety concerns in the home. So as you can see, we service a variety of adults with an array of backgrounds because, like I said, disorganization really doesn't discriminate, and we're seeing that there's quite a need in Grand Rapids and beyond throughout West Michigan. Today, I want to focus on a few things. So we're going to talk about what gets in the way. Typically, when clients call me, they're at that point where they're feeling stuck, they're overwhelmed, they're not sure where to even start. And we're going to talk about, some of those barriers and then getting to where you want to be. I'm also going to talk about some fun tips and trends of the trade, and you can see kind of what's happening right now with organizing products, what's popular, and what might suit you in your home. Whenever I do these presentations, I always start with this mindfulness exercise because I think it's really important and it gets people thinking about their stuff, their home environments. So please take a note, keep your eyes open, and I want you to just note some of your thoughts, your feelings, your body reactions as I move through these images. So please take a moment to reflect on some of those reactions. And I want you to really be true to yourself because there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just going to let you know that when I've done this in the public and we've had viewers were able to share some of their responses, I get a range of responses. So some will say that, the cluttered areas or what someone would say, quote unquote, is messy, gave them some anxiety. Some were able to relate. They said, hey, that's what my office looks like. Others said that, the after photos that are more organized were, unrealistic, or maybe just too organized for them or not achievable. So there's no right or wrong answers in this situation. And I mention this because there's something that's really important. If you're trying to get organized or you're thinking about working with an organizer, I want you to know that there's no one size fits all to getting organized or getting your life organized. So please keep that in mind. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today, some of it may work for you, some of it may not. If you have ADD, if you have hoarding behaviors, if you have physical limitations, if you have trauma, it's going to affect you differently. So these methods may not work for you, or certain things may, but I want you to know there's a ton of different resources out there to get you to where you want to be. But keep that in mind. My organized is not going to look necessarily the same as your organized. We also have different clutter thresholds. I make note of that. I see it a lot with partners or spouses, or people cohabitating where, they may not mind a little bit of clutter, or they may not mind a little bit of quote unquote mess. So just keep that in mind. And I see it with quite a bit of my creatives. Some of my clients are incredibly intelligent, but their home environment isn't a reflection of their brain in the works. Also, I want you to know that the photos are false. Yes, we can create beautiful Instagram photos. I can put the beautiful photos up, when we stage a home, I can post those photos all over my website. But we also know that that necessarily isn't real life. Real life is you might have kids, you may be working full time and running a household. You may have trauma, you may have loss. So please try not to compare yourself or, try to achieve that outcome of what you see on social media, because as you know, social media really isn't real life. I also want to say, oftentimes when we go on the home, they're met with shame. They feel a lot of shame, or, they're feeling guilty about their spaces. And they're like, this is the worst you've ever seen. I'm going to tell you that that's not the truth. So yours isn't the worst, and try to be kind to yourself when you're moving through this, because that kind of thought process, it isn't productive and it's not going to help you get to where you want to be. There are some universal truths. And when I talk about, organizing or decluttering or evaluating your belongings, I always want to talk about stuff. So let's talk about that a little bit. The truth is that we all have too much of it. 48% of Americans consider their homes to be at least somewhat cluttered with items they no longer use. 1 in 7 Americans have a room in their home they cannot use because it's filled with things that they rarely use or need. 27% of Americans spend 2 or more hours weekly looking for lost or misplaced items. So if any of these truths are speaking to you, take a moment to don't guilt yourself, but start thinking about that. Have your rooms lost functionality? Is there, are you losing things? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But before we go too deep into the stuff, I want you to know that I have stuff too. All right. I love throw pillows. So I don't want you to feel like I'm pointing fingers at you, that I'm trying to be hard on you. We've all got stuff, and my stuff is going to look different than your stuff. So keep that in mind. However, there tends to be a downside to stuff. So let's talk a little bit about clutter and some of the effects. Ultimately, stuff takes our time and energy. It can overstimulate us, causing our sensory systems to work overtime. It can frustrate us, making it harder to find things, and constantly remind our brains that we still have this huge to-do list. It can even make it more difficult to relax physically and mentally, even affecting sleep. And it can even cause anxiety because the thought of where to begin or where to start is overwhelming. However, it can get better, I promise. And we've helped a lot of people in their homes, get a fresh start, get to where they want to be, and get their homes more manageable. But there's a lot of things that get in the way. And while we are going to talk, again, we're going to talk about some tips of the trade, I do want to focus on some of the psychological and the emotional attachment to items, because this is a huge factor that makes it difficult for folks. So again, thoughts and feelings, these are getting in the way. We get stuck. And you know what, this is deeply psychologically rooted. There's research on it, so I'm not just saying this based off of the practice. However, I can say that, verify that these are some truths in regards to the thoughts and feelings. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the save factor. We tend to keep things for sentimental purposes. So the items may remind us of important people or events. We have that fear for losing the past or losing a memory. There's also items have instrumental use. Our things, really all items have potential or utility. And I see this a lot with my creative folks, because they see some potential or utility that I may not see, that's not visible for me. So again, this is a fear for the future. It's just in case I could use this. We also save things because they're aesthetically pleasing. So these are items that we're fascinated with, we find visually pleasing. And for those of you that are familiar with Marie Kondo, this is kind of the items that spark joy. You walk into the room and you admire them, you enjoy them. And then there's the fear factor. So there's a fear for the future we mentioned. So we may need it in the future, a fear for the past that we're going to be losing a memory, and then fear of making a mistake. And I bring that up because oftentimes what gets in the way for my clients is perfection. They want to make the perfect decision. They want to find the perfect outlet, and that gets in the way of making progress. Again, there's the personal factor. So, and some of this can be positive. I want to bring that out too, that our stuff is not necessarily negative. It can have positive connotations. But when we look at our stuff, we often see it as a part of our legacy. It's a reflection of who we are. It's part of our story. It's our history. However, we also believe that things have magical powers. So we might think that an item has a connection to an event or to a specific person, or objects may inherit the essence of someone. So imagine that, when you've got passed down items from grandparents, great grandparents, maybe you get an autograph from somebody famous. For some reason, our brains convince us that that still holds some sort of power or connection to them. Personification, that's another one, is that we start to over-identify items as having human characteristics. So we start to believe that our stuff has feelings. Nobody's going to take care of it as good as I am. They're not going to appreciate it like I would. Almost like we're going to hurt our items' feelings, our belongings' feelings, by letting go of them. I hear this one a lot, and that's compensation theory. So that's something where maybe we're filling a void from our past. Maybe we had some form of trauma. Maybe, if you've experienced homelessness, that might be something where there's that fear of being without. I also hear quite a bit, that folks are, they grew up with little. So they try to compensate by buying more and more because they didn't have access to those things before. I also see this with parents because they start to feel guilty. Parents work typically now, modern day is that both parents are working in the home, and there's some guilt in that they don't get to spend time with their kids as much as they'd like. So they may compensate by buying items. We're going to talk a little bit more about the guilt factor because this is a huge one. These are some of the tops, excuse me, these are some of the top items that people feel guilty letting go or donating or discarding. Gifts, that's a huge one. I've worked in many homes where they've held on to gifts. The gift isn't being put to use. It's stagnant energy. It's just taking up space, but yet there's this guilt of letting go. The other piece is family heirlooms. That's something that's difficult, especially for some of the millennials these days, is that they're not necessarily interested in China or some of those pieces that maybe were passed down from generation to generation. Clothing rarely worn. This is a huge one, and we've done a lot of closets. So you're not alone in having too much clothes or buying something that you thought you were going to fit into, or your skinny jeans, things of that nature that with the tag still on it. So that's another one people feel guilty about, and they hold on for the someday. Someday I'm going to fit into it. Someday I'm going to wear into it. Greeting cards, this is a big one. And in practice, because they don't take up as much space, they're not as bulky. We don't always address those readily because some people have a very strong attachment to them. When we're looking at the guilt factor, a big part of our jobs as organizers is giving you permission. And that's something I want you to try to teach yourself, is giving yourself permission to let go. Another thing that we do in practice is sometimes we'll take photos of items or have the client take photos. So kind of a photojournalism documentation of the item. And it's, to say that the client necessarily goes through and makes picture books of the items, that's not necessarily true in most cases. However, that ritual of taking the photo, there's some sort of healing or something that happens there. The sell factor. Another big part of my job is working with folks to really educate them. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, that can be sold on Amazon for this amount, or that's really expensive on Amazon. However, you've got to really do your research, because something can be listed on Amazon or eBay, I should say, on eBay, and sit there for weeks, months, or years and not actually sell. So just because something's listed for a top dollar amount on eBay or Amazon, that doesn't mean that it's going to be sold. Another thing too is that the market is always changing. So we have to keep in mind that, maybe those Beanie Babies were collectible when you purchased them, and there may be some that are collectible. However, it's rare, and they're actually filtering at different, you can see them at different garage sales, at the flea markets. So keep that in mind. Really do your research. I also tell people, if you're looking at selling items, what's your time worth? So when we work with clients, if there's a large estate or if they have a heavy amount of items, let's say they're downsizing into a smaller unit, we might look at the sale of items via consignment, via an estate sale, or a liquidation or buyout. So there's different vendors that we can work with that, and you've got different options all throughout West Michigan or Grand Rapids, the Grand Rapids area. However, if you're thinking of, individually selling items on eBay or possibly Facebook Marketplace, that's a great platform. However, what's your time worth? Because you're going to be fielding different messages. Do you really have the time to do it? Because you're going to be fielding messages, you're going to be responding to people, people may not show up. So consider that when you're looking at selling items. What I tell people is figure out your top dollar, what you'd like for it, your bottom dollar, because people are going to try, they're going to try to negotiate with you. Also, figure out, set some ground rules for how long that item can sit before you decide, that it's going to be sold. So let's say, maybe you're going to have it in its holding place for about a month. And after that, if it hasn't sold, maybe consider donating it. The mindset factor. So any good organizer will tell you that if you want to simplify your life, if you want to make things easier, you've got to really reevaluate stuff. Our stuff, you've got to think about it. It takes up not only our space, it takes up our time, it takes up our energy. We've got to move it around. We've got to clean it. We've got to find a place for it. We may need to rotate it, whatever it may be. Also, if we've got too much stuff, you can start to lose money. And that's something what we see is that people lose items. They get buried or they get put in the catch-all room. They forget that they have them and they end up purchasing duplicates. So I want you to start rethinking about your stuff and start seeing it as your space, your time, and your energy, and how could that better be spent? Another thing too is when we go into decluttering or organizing a home, we go into it like it's this terrible task that we have to complete. And it's hard to see the big picture. It's hard to figure out the end game. So really, I wanted you to think about what's your why factor. Why are you doing this? Are you getting organized? What would you rather be doing with your time and energy? So start to think about what's living your best life. What does that look like? So really, when I try work with my clients, I encourage them to start to cast a vision of what matters to them most. Maybe they want to spend more time with their kids. Maybe they want to spend more time with their grandkids. Maybe they want to travel more. Maybe it's something where, I want to be able to go to yoga or I want to read books. I want to start up some new hobbies, but I feel guilty because I feel like I always have, this project looming over me. So really start to think about what are you going to do with that extra time, that extra energy. So let's talk a little bit more about some other items that get in the way, and I see this quite regularly in practice. The time factor. I don't have time to get organized. I'm too busy, and I'm going to tell you it's really difficult because that's one thing I see is that people don't necessarily commit to it. A big part of our jobs as organizers is that we are your accountability partners. We're your body doubles. They know if you're going to go into session, it's like, hey, we're going to focus on this. When you're scheduling session with an organizer, you're committing to it. So I encourage clients, if this is something you're going to be doing independently, I want you to commit to a time frame. Start small, maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour. Figure out the day that you want to do it, and then containerize your time or put in a time slot. Really, then once you've written that down or you've put it in your phone, you're committed. Also, give yourself permission. So let's say you commit to 30 minutes of organizing or decluttering. Allow yourself to be done after that time and figure out something to reward yourself. And I compare it for people with me if it's going to the gym. So I look at it that way. So that's something I'm always struggling with is keeping up with physical activity aside from working with clients. So looking at if I say, oh, okay, I'm going to buy a gym membership, but I don't have a plan in place. So I don't know, when am I going to work out? What days and times work well? What coordinates with my son's schedule? When do I have to work? I've got to figure all that out. And it also helps, to have a friend with me. So I'm held more accountable. So having that accountability piece. I also want to say, make it a fun event. That's something, when we're working with clients, we like to bring a little bit of humor. Our clients may like listening to music or having some background noise. And also, it's okay to ask for help. That's something. I know I keep mentioning hiring a professional organizer, but if you have somebody that's a friend, that's non-judgmental, that is going to give you a little bit of that tough love, a little bit of that push, and can be your hands for you, that can make the task a lot more easy on you and prevent some of that overwhelm. Another thing I just missed over this or went over this was bucket days. So we have everybody's got bucket days for different things. So let's say trash day. So I know my trash is on Thursdays and that Wednesday nights, it's like we got to take out the trash Wednesday nights. So start thinking about, adding some bucket days to your routine. Maybe it's going through paperwork. Maybe it's just organizing the living room or putting the room back together. So start to think about that and what you can do on those specific bucket days. It helps you commit a little bit better. I also want to say, because I know a lot of my clients and myself included have a history of being the yes person. Yes, I'll help you move. Yes, I'll come to your event. Yes, I'll, I'll go to your Tupperware party. So I want to give you permission that it's okay to be selfish. And really, you're not being selfish by saying no. It's actually having healthy boundaries. And if you're going to prioritize organizing or decluttering in your home, that's something you've got to learn to do is say no and start to prioritize it. The hard work factor. This is another one. I will say when I go into clients' homes and we typically start with a tour, get to know the spaces, and they give me a laundry list of everything they don't like about their home, what they're struggling with in life, what's not streamlined, what's not working for them. And it's huge. It's a long list of items. It's a huge to-do list. But really it's a master project. And that's something where it's a huge project. It's not easy for one person to tackle on their own. So what we do together is really work together to put together a plan and then also break things into smaller steps. So we're going to talk about that. And so where you can prevent some of that overwhelm and how to break this huge project, your master project into a to-do list. So planning and prep. We're going to go deeper into these, but planning an escape route. So let's say you are evaluating or decluttering items. Where are they going to go? Start small and simple. Where are you going to get started? So, if you're thinking your whole house, that's pretty overwhelming. So let's start to simplify that and start smaller. Prep like a pro. Do you have the right tools? Do you have what you need to organize? And then evaluate. So I'm going to go deeper into that, but really, sometimes people get a little bit uncomfortable with the thought of decluttering or discarding, throwing things away that can cause some anxiety with people. So a better way of looking at it is evaluating your items. What do you really value the most? And a lot of these, when we talk about outlet sphere items, some of these are specific to West Michigan areas, and more so Grand Rapids. But I want you to start planning your escape route. Goodwill is a great outlet. They have a wonderful recycling system for old electronics. Please look at their list online to make sure that they accept the items, because one thing I know that they don't like is monitors and those box TVs. So I do love Goodwill because they're one of the top recyclers and they accept most items. There's been some questionable things I brought to Goodwill and I'm like, I don't know if they're going to take this. And my client was thinking it might go in the trash, but I'm like, they do quite a bit of recycling and I've never been turned away. Habitat for Humanity is another great local resource, as far as if you have different home supplies, different things for building, etc. They'll take some of that off of your hands. If these are not specific to you, I want you to start thinking about, the gift of giving and what's going to make you feel good. Maybe you have a connection to foster care or refugee foster care. Maybe you have a connection to helping women and you're going through your clothes and maybe some of your toiletries. There's women's outreach centers in that area. Maybe you're going through your food items and there's various places that for food donations, some of the missions downtown. So start to think about where those outlets are. However, I want you to know that there's not a perfect outlet for everything. And we tend to forecast or try to mind read, play fortune teller of what's going to be done with those items. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, I'm not going to take it to fill in the blank because they're just going to throw it in the dumpster. I saw my friend told me about it one time. Okay, that may have occurred, but at the end of the day, we don't know what they're going to do with things and we have to let them do their job. So when I work with clients, I tell them, we've got a big enough job here, using your brain and making decisions on these items and finding a place for them in your home. That's a lot of work. So let's do our job and let them decide what they want to keep, what they want to sell, what they want to sell or what they want to recycle. Depending on, the conditions of your home, you may need trash services. So there's different options for that. There's certainly a ton of dumpster companies out there. There's also trash pickup companies. So some of that is helpful because what I've noticed is sometimes when you put a dumpster in the neighborhood, it becomes the community neighborhood dumpster. I also too am a huge advocate for shred services. So this is something where my clients, they'll have piles and boxes of papers and they're like, well, I'm going to shred all of these. And I'm like, okay, well, how would you rather spend your time? Because that's pretty time consuming, especially if you just have a small shredder. So there's a lot of different places for shred services. There's some companies that will pick up. I know that you can take them to Office Depot. They charge roughly 99 cents a pound. Also FedEx, UPS, all of those places offer shred services. Old electronics, and we see a lot of these in homes where people get stuck. They're not sure what to do with them. Best Buy has a program. Again, check out their website because these programs are always changing. But my understanding is they will take up to 3 items per day per household. Again, there is some limits on what they'll accept, and that's free at this time. Again, check out their website. Comprenew is another one. They'll take any old electronics, and they are a nonprofit. However, there are fees associated with that that you can also find on their website. Hazardous waste, this is another one. This is huge. So some of those, if you've got old paints, old chemicals, here in Kent County, we have an awesome program through Reimagine Trash. They have the Safe Chem, Safe Med, Safe Sharps program. So you can figure out where to bring those items. For example, there's different, they'll tell you where those drop boxes are that you can bring old medications. They'll tell you where, if you've got sharps, if you're diabetic, that those can go to the health department. And then if you're looking beyond that, if there's things that you can't find on there, Earth 911 is also a great resource. And that's not just for Michigan, I believe that's nationwide. So definitely check that out. If you're questioning where an item should go, definitely use those as a resource. Paper. You'll see I have paper twice because paper is one of my nemesises. So, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. And I tell people, it's something to get on top of before it takes a hold of you, because as we get older, the more and more papers come in, all of the medical papers that we have, the explanations of benefits. If you're on Medicare, there's constantly, you're bombarded with things. So a few different things when we're working with clients, we'll oftentimes, if they don't have recycling there on site, use Paper Gator Recycling to bring items. You can go right on their website and you can find a Paper Gator close to you. And it's actually a fundraiser for different churches, nonprofits, and schools. And you can go and you can bring your papers there. However, please be careful if your papers do have sensitive information. There's no guarantee that that's protected. So you'd want to use shred services for that. There's also a lot of different online options and apps out there to slow the paper game. So again, to stop some of that incoming paperwork, DMA Choice, the opt-out screen, Catalog Choice, those are some free ones that you can go onto, and some of them do have add-on options. Paper Karma, this is another one that's an app. So they actually do the work for you. You upload pictures and they will help unsubscribe you. There's also, I should mention digitally, there's Unroll Me that will help with some of that digital clutter in your email. That's another app that you can use. I see quite a bit of manuals, but typically in lots of situations, people can't necessarily find them maybe when they need them. And again, realistically, how often or do you even need the manuals? And I'm not saying that there's not exceptions to that rule, but consider, sorting through your manuals and checking out manuals online. Because there's a whole database of different manuals on there. And I will say that, historically, I have been able to find most manuals, on the web. Cam card is another one. If you've got an excess of business cards, you can scan those and upload them to your phone and save them as contacts. Passwords. How many clients have I worked with that have lost their passwords? So LastPass is an awesome option. It's free with add-on features, free up to 1 device beginning in March, so March 2021. And this is a great place. It's a vault for all of your passwords. So it's all in one place. Again, there are add-on options, so you can have that access to it on your phone, your computer, your tablet, etc. Start simple. This is something too, is, I really want you to start thinking about, where do you get stuck? Because this is not where you're going to want to start organizing. And there may be people that are pointing fingers at you saying, you've got too much of this, you've got too much crafting supplies, your tools are all over the place, or you really need to go through your clothing. I want you to put blinders up to what people are saying too. So put on some earmuffs, and I want you to start thinking about what's going to be easiest for you. Because what I've seen through practice is we start with something simple and you get more and more practice in, and some of that decision-making process gets easier over time. So I noted some of these things because these are some things that we see people tend to get stuck on. The crafting and art supplies, my creative clients, this is something that's difficult for them. They see the potential and the utility in those items. Tools, again, that's a lot of that just in case. Those have a lot of utility. We may be able to use them in the future. Clothing, this can be a tough one for many. And again, not everybody's different. But what we see again, see a lot of people get stuck with their skinny clothes, or maybe their weight fluctuates, so they want to keep all of their pieces. Or maybe they spent a lot of money on it and they're not maybe going to see the return. Books, that's another one. To me, when I work with clients that have a lot of books, that's a reflection, of them saying like they're knowledgeable, they're smart, they've absorbed all of this information. And there is such a thing as information hoarding. I should make mention. People do save paper, save articles, things of that nature. But those, I would never start with papers unless that's the only area in your home you need to, or excuse me, you'd like to work on. If you've got everything under control, papers are very time consuming. They are important, again, like I said, but they're not necessarily a great starter, and they're easy to get stuck on. Save the sentimental for later. And this is something when we're in session with clients, we'll start a sentimental box and we won't even go there. So if we're evaluating a space, maybe we're not necessarily working by category, we'll put aside those photos, those cards. If there's things like children and family items or other memorabilia, we put that aside. That's where you're going to get stuck. It's going to stall the process. And if you're working in a space, I encourage you to consider setting it aside, because you want to be able to set aside ample time to really go through those items, and stay focused on the task at hand. Start small. So, if you're just starting to get organized, I want you to think smaller spaces. So, when we're looking at spaces, and again, there's two schools of thoughts here because we do organize by space and by category. But if you're looking at a space, I want you to start with a drawer, a shelf, maybe a cupboard or a closet, something smaller, something that you're going to get some of that practice in. If you're looking at, a specific category, these are some that tend to be easier for clients. So old cosmetics, something where, there's maybe a little bit of foundation left in there, but you're not quite ready to get rid of it, but you might have replaced it with something else. Looking at, are those things that you can throw away, recycle, or put together a plan to use those up so that they can be, discarded, or recycled. Expired meds, we see a lot of these, and I think people get stuck because they're not sure of what to do with them. Again, we have drop boxes all throughout West Michigan. I know Myers, Walgreens has them. You can cross off your name. You can cross off your name on there if needed, or peel off the stickers. However, I do want you to know that they do follow HIPAA laws for that. Grocery bags. I cannot tell you how many reusable grocery bags that I've seen, or even just the plastic bags. If you're finding excess of that and it's taking up underneath your sink, or, and you can't get to your cleaning supplies or your plumbing, maybe consider going through those. And please note in Kent County that those no longer go into recycling. That they'd prefer that you take those to other your grocery outlets like Myers. A spice rack, this is another one, old spices. I have some different rules with food. So to speak to my clients, is this something that you would feed your family or your grandkids? Is this something you would put on your food today? So, to kind of guide you with some of that. But again, these are small little things that can work and build into bigger spaces or bigger categories. If you are feeling really motivated, I do want you to, think bigger in a few different ways, and I'm going to mention that. So oftentimes, when we work with clients, we get a lot of calls about basements, garages. It may be a room that turned into a catch-all that is no longer is functional. So if that's, if those are good starters, if you're pretty well groomed and making those decisions. And again, if you have a second set of hands, that's really helpful. I do prefer to work in these spaces with clients, because what I find is in basements, sometimes we'll find moving boxes that weren't unpacked that have been sitting there for 5+ years. There may be items that were just kind of thrown down in the basement because they're out of sight, out of mind. So they may not have a lot of relevancy. They may not be relevant in the person's life. Additionally, in the basement, we'll see a lot of, I'm going to say one thing to scope out is empty boxes. There's a thing a lot of us, we save our empty boxes. I see this a lot with tools or large appliances. For some reason, it's hard to let go of those items. So I think people like to save them for potential sale, or if they have to return them, pay note to warranties. How long do you need to keep the box? Do you really need it to return it? Do you even have the receipt anymore? Also, if some people will save them, they'll say, well, if we move, well, how long do you want to store it for? How long do you want it to take up your space for? In the event that you may move. At the very least, look at those empty boxes and start to break them down. So again, I bring that up because I can't tell you how many times, and we get excited when even underneath a bin or underneath a box with stuff in it, there we find those empty boxes piled up. Old taxes, those are another things like that. While, paper will start to build a lot of weight in a room or in a space. So, talk to your accountant, but typically, the IRS, I believe, generally it's 3 years that they can audit, or maybe up to 7. However, talk to your accountant, and there's some guides online. Susie Orman has a guide. I know there's other ones out there that you can reference that can give you guidance on, what papers to keep and for how long. Old electronics, that's another one where people have those old box TVs, and part of it is, the physical factor of getting that moved out. And old VCRs, things that they're not using, and maybe they have old VHS tapes that, they're not watching, and they've moved over to Netflix or Hulu or some of the online options. So really be true to yourself with that. And another large items, again, stagnant furniture. That's something too, where people get a new piece, a new chair, a new couch, but they move, the piece of furniture into storage where, it's not actually being utilized. It's not reaching its potential, but rather it's just stagnant energy in there. Again, large items, linens, blankets, pillows, stuffed animals. These are things that we kind of scope out for. The bigger, the better. And then non-self-storage. And I bring that up because I work with a lot of families, a lot of parents, a lot of grandparents that turn into a storage facility for their kids or their grandkids. Some of it, in some circumstances, the individual may be sentimental, and there's some items that they want to keep, as memories, as or for sentimental purposes. However, I want you to be wary and be cautious of boundaries. Are you becoming a storage facility for your kids? How long until, they're in their space that they can take responsibility for their items? That's a huge thing that our kids need to know from a young age is taking personal responsibility for their items. And oftentimes I've seen that, they may not want those items in their space. They're not important to them enough. They'd rather prefer you hold on to them. And that's not really fair to you. Prep like a pro. So these are just some of the supplies that we bring on site when we're working with clients. So this list includes a timer. Again, you can use your phone for this, but when we're committing and we're containerizing our time, we've committed to it in our phone or our planner. I want you to set a timer. And sometimes when you're getting started, what I'll do with clients is we'll do a timer for 30 minutes and just kind of check in and see where we're at. How are we feeling about everything? Are we getting overwhelmed? Are we feeling good about progress? Do we get distracted? Do I need to bring you back into the space? Snacks and beverage, this is something, drink plenty of water. If you're going to be doing a long haul, make sure that you've got some snacks to eat. Cleaning supplies, this is another one. When I'm with clients and I'm like, if we go into a new home and we're going to be resettling, or if we're going to be taking apart, a cupboards in a kitchen to reorganize and zone out the pantry or a kitchen space, I'm saying, like, get your cleaning supplies out. Let's really vacuum out the cupboards. Let's wipe things down, because how often are you taking things out of that dresser, out of the cupboards, out of that closet, and really giving it a deep clean and to eradicate some of that dust. Comfortable seating, that's another thing, is I'll start to work with clients in session, and they're bending and lifting and moving all over the place, or standing, and they're not really comfortable, and that kind of sets the tone or sets the stage for getting burnout or tired. At times too, it's difficult to start. We have to look at ergonomics, and if there's enough space, putting together or putting out a table or a folding table so that we're able to sort or process items there. sorting boxes. And two, when you're working with boxes, make sure that you have some in small size and some in medium size. Be cautious not to use super big boxes. I see that as something that clients they come into is that the box is too hard for them to move, and a big box to sort through is overwhelming. So they can't lift it, they can't get it out to their car if they're taking it for donations or for family members. So make sure that you're getting an ergonomically correct, it's not too large box. Clear and or white trash bags and black trash bags. So as much as I tell my brain that I'm going to keep the two separate. So if I'm working with linens or with textiles in a closet with clothing, I always have, two different color bags because, you can say, well, this bag's going to be for trash, the black bag, and then the white bag is going to be, or a clear bag is going to be for linens. That works better than having a bag of, just one color. It really helps our brains to distinguish the two. Sharpies and Post-its, and those work great for temporary labels for items. And we'll talk about some of that, the different categories when you're sorting. Packaging tape is another thing for putting the boxes together. Now, I'm gonna encourage you again because waitlist some of your wants. And that's twofold, really. So when you're working and you're evaluating your items, it's easy to think like, okay, I've got to get organizing tools. I've got to go out, I've got to buy the bins. I've got to buy the under the bed organizers, the drawer organizers. And in some cases, depending on the amount of stuff that you have, that may be helpful to move items into bins, especially in a basement space. So you're going to keep those items. However, we typically find that people have a lot of the tools there that they already need, and maybe they're just underutilizing them. So please wait to buy. I also encourage clients, when we're working together, especially when we're going through a basement, if we're going through some of those catch-all rooms, you're going to find things. You're going treasure hunting. We organizers joke around, decluttering is the new shopping. You're going to find things that you forget about. So start to watch or try to curb some of your buying activity or behaviors till after you decluttered a space or really evaluated or taken good inventory of what you have. Set the stage. Now, I'm bringing this up because, typically as organizers, there's times when, depending on the volume of items we may work in the space with the client. However, sometimes there's not enough room to work in there, maybe because it's so heavily cluttered. So consider this, staging an area for sorting. If the area you want to work in is too full and maybe overwhelming, you're not going to have enough space to lay out your supplies and your boxes for sorting. So see if there's an adjacent space close by that you can work in. I want you to bring all your supplies to that target or staged area. And that, and again, make sure that you're comfortable. So bring all the supplies to the target area. This is going to keep you from getting distracted and having to run out. Okay, I need some water, and then getting distracted, or, oh, wait, I forgot packaging tape. I got to go run and get that. So bring all your supplies to a target or staged area. And folks, if you're trying to get organized, you want to work on a space, just gathering these supplies and staging them where you're going to work is a step one. That counts as getting started on the organizing process or decluttering. Once you've got all your supplies there, I want you to put together your boxes, label them, and try to keep them within reach, within close reach to your seated area. So you want them to be within arm's reach. Be conscious of, how much do you have to get up? How much do you have to bend over? And then also, if you're working in a space, let's say if you have staged out a separate area, I want you to be able to go have some empty boxes for loose items. So start bringing boxes from that area or collecting those loose items, putting them into boxes and bringing them to the area to sort or evaluate. Again, set a timer, start small, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, check in with yourself. And if you're ready to go beyond that, that's great. So really start small to prevent some of that burnout and check in with yourself. Now, again, I said that people get a little bit turned off when they start to hear discard or declutter. And I will say that us organizers have a bad rap out there. They said, are you going to want to throw away all my stuff? Are you going to want to get rid of everything? And it's like, no, that's not our role. We can't make decisions for you. However, we can offer some coaching. We can offer some guidance and help you with that decision-making process. But at the end of the day, it's your stuff and you get to decide with that. And we've got to empower you to make those decisions. So when you're starting to evaluate stuff, start with some simple categories. As organizers, we branch out and we really start to fine tune this into more specific categories. But I want you to first heavily focus on doing a rough sort, what we call a rough sort. So, donate, have a donate box nearby. And again, we're using our Sharpies, our Post-its and Sharpies to label these boxes. The Post-its do help because they're bright colors and it's a little bit easier to read. Discard or trash, so having your trash bag close to you. If you have bulkier items, you may want to consider using a box. A keep box, so those are the items that you know you want to keep. And be careful not to squirrel those items away, because I'll see people will sort and they'll start to set them next to them or set them over here. Really try to keep them in the box so that you avoid trying reprocessing those items or coming back to them. And then relocate. Now, this is one that is a huge help. So if I'm working, let's say in a kitchen with somebody and they come across Christmas items, they'll say, oh, okay, I'm going to take these down to the basement real quick. Then they go down to the basement and then they get distracted and they come back up. Well, it's not necessarily productive or time. It's not timely to use that method. And you have that risk of getting distracted. So putting together a relocate box for items that need to go outside of the room that you're looking in is really helpful. And you can choose, a lot of times at the end of session, we'll try to bring them to their home. So if they need to go to the bathroom or they need to go down to the basement, we'll maybe bring those at the end of session. If we've got all rooms to work on, we may say, you know what, we're just going to keep these here depending on the volume of clutter or stuff. Family, friends, this is something too, is that that people tend to get stuck on is items for families and friends. And we do encourage, yes, if there's items that you want to set aside and you ask your friends. However, we do want to set some boundaries on it, and people work well with deadlines. So, it may be, let's say, I know with COVID aside, this is a little bit different, but we would encourage you to bring them at family gatherings, or next time you have family gatherings, that's the opportunity. That is the opportunity for them to come and retrieve their items. It is, I have seen it where people get stuck with stuff because their family or friends may not want to pick up items. It's good, again, to set a time limit. Let them know, I'm going to hold on to this for the next 2 weeks. It's on my porch. It's in my garage if you need it, or we can set aside a time for me to drop it off to you. But after that, if I'm going to just assume you're no longer interested, and I will just move forward with donating. Again, items to set aside that can stall the process when you're moving, that are very time consuming. Papers, again, papers are something that when we're working and with a high volume of stuff, we typically set aside. We start a paper box so that, your focus can be steadily on sorting through those papers. It's often an assignment we give between sessions. So, you can sit comfortably at a chair. We'll set up the shred, the keep, the recycle boxes for you, the action items. But when you're working in a space and there's a good mixed batch of items, you want to set those items, the papers, aside. Again, they're time consuming. Sentimental items, again, we discussed that, setting those aside and allowing yourself ample time to really process those and go through them. The last thing, and there's different schools of thoughts on this, there's a rule that I hear some organizers go by called Ohio, only handle it once. However, my clients are ready to do that. Some of them, they're questioning. So it's okay to have a question mark box. However, when we go back to those questions, I want you to really take time to reflect on why you're questioning the item. So really start to question yourself. All items are not created equally. And we do have favorites. And that's something too, when I'm working with clients. If we have an inventory, if we've done a rough sort and we've categorized or grouped like items together, we'll say, okay, you have, let's say 50 hats. All right, let's look at all your hats, and I'll kind of put them out so they're in a lot and you can visually see all of them. Okay, which ones are your favorites? Okay, immediately you picked these, 6 out of 10, let's say, that were your favorites. Those are the ones that you love. Those are the ones that the joy factor, that spark joy. So what is it? It seems like you're questioning these other ones. They're not your favorites. So what are we holding on to them for? So some questions to ask yourself. And again, there's different lines of questioning for everybody. And when I work with clients or when our team does, we have to figure out what line of questioning works for them. So just some different ideas. Do I need this? Could I live without it? Is it worth sacrificing my space for? Do I have duplicates? Do I have something better? And I even had a client where, what worked for her was like, do you have something cuter? Or I've seen, you've got all these black tops, but this one's cuter than that one. This one may be better. It's not pilling, so really starting to be a little bit more selective about the item. So figure out, again, playing favorites, which one's going to speak to you. Am I keeping this out of guilt? Again, giving yourself permission. When people give gifts, do you think that they meant for you to keep it forever? Because the gift is really in the giving. It's the action of giving. And if I was giving someone gifts and I expected them to keep that forever, that would be a control and power thing. So really, determine, am I keeping this out of guilt if it's a gift? Am I keeping it because I'm guilty because I never used it? Again, if you haven't used it, it's stagnant energy. Put it in the hands of somebody that will use it. Will keeping this help me live the life I envisioned? Again, bringing back that vision you casted of spending more time with your grandkids, of spending, or having time to read at night and feeling relaxed. So again, how is that going to help you achieve that goal? And really, I'm going to tell you, if you want to meet your goals, you've got to be bold and learn to love, your items or leave them or let go of them. I also tell clients, expect some anxiety. It's going to happen. You're going to feel anxious about your decisions, but it's going to pass. One thing we do for our clients is we take away donations. And that's something too with your escape route. Make sure that your car is, open and that you have an ample space or you have a pickup plan or somebody to help with the hauling. But get those donations out right away because you are going to start to question yourself and you may start digging through those donation boxes again. So do the best you can to get those donation items out immediately. So moving into some of the tips of the trade, we're going to talk a little bit about products and things that you may find helpful in your home. So you've gone through, you've evaluated what's most valuable to you, you've played favorites, you've got good inventory of your space now. So I'm going to teach you some different organizing words when we like to sound a little fancy. We talk about vertical space a lot. And that's something we can notice point blank when we walk in and it's very flat. Things are very at waist level, which is sometimes necessary depending on, their heights or if they need things accessible because they're in a wheelchair or have different physical capabilities, or if they're children and we want to keep things at their level. But we do want to look at utilizing some of that vertical space. Sometimes it can be as simple as adding some hooks or a drawer system or shelving. And that may be something that's missing, in your spaces. So again, looking at the wall space, what you can use and start to hang things. Another thing I put up there is pegboard spaces. I see desks get cluttered quite a bit, and having something, where you're hanging some of your hanging files or some of your office supplies, having those overhead, someplace where you can still reach them, but it's not now necessarily in your primary workspace. So again, start looking at your vertical space and looking at your furniture. Maybe your furniture pieces aren't servicing you anymore, and maybe you need a taller dresser or drawer system. So again, always looking at vertical space. What can we use? How can we best optimize that space? Visual. So a lot of my clients are very visual, and there's always exception to that rule. There's sometimes people like to use the fabric or different material of bins or totes of things to store items in. But we do primarily recommend clear items are really helpful. They're helpful. It's easier for our eyes, for our brains to identify items. It's also, especially for our kids, that visual there. If you aren't going to utilize the clear items, please be sure to label. And you'll know us organizers, we want to label everything, have a home for everything, and know where everything's going to go. But again, using some of those visual cues to note that this is where the item goes. I work with a lot of families, and this is something too I want to bring up, that they'll try to keep things visual for their kids or do labels, or it may be even a spouse or partner. It doesn't necessarily have to be a child, but I'll say, well, they're not putting things back where they're supposed to be. And I'm going to tell you, even with the visuals, it takes a lot of reinforcement. And you've got to have buy-in from your spouse, your partner, your kids, having those discussions, getting them on board, offering them some coaching, even with my clients, learning some of those maintenance behaviors of tending to their items and creating routines. It takes time. So again, for many of us, having that visual and having something that indicator of where things are is going to make things easier for us to identify them. Containerize is another word. We do love containers. We do want to contain things, but before you go out and you buy containers, I always want, and these are some pitfalls to avoid because I see quite a few work with clients where they purchase supplies, but they didn't necessarily measure first. Or maybe they picked the wrong material and they can't add a label to it easily. So I want you to always measure your space, make sure that you're filling the space adequately. You're not overpacking it, keeping it about 90% full. So measuring the space, even, sketching out something, a visual, and it does not have to be interior design quality, but a sketch of that closet or that shelving space or under the sink, whatever it may be, to know, what, if there are barriers in there and what you have to be conscious of and, helping you pick out the right size, the bin or container for you. Materials, again, we're going to talk a little bit. Acrylics are really popular right now, and I do like those because they're very visually pleasing. They're clear, so you can see what's inside of them. However, there might be areas where maybe you want a bin or a container where it hides items and you're not as readily able to view, especially if you've got toys maybe in your main living area and it makes sense to do a cube bin and have some cute mix and match bins. Again, there's no need for everything to be uniform. It's okay to play around with different materials when you're working in spaces. We do that quite a bit. Not everything has to be acrylic. You can mix and match acrylic. You can mix and match rattan. You can mix and match all, felt. It can be all different things, but keep in mind, start to piece together and get inspired by looking at photos, which I'll talk to you a little bit about to see what material speaks to you. Always read your reviews. All right. So there are really great organizing products out there. However, there's a lot of really cheap organizing products out there. And sometimes I will say you do get what you pay for. So if you're shopping online, make sure that you're reading your reviews. Also, save your receipts or save your order, if you're ordering online, make sure that you create a username and password so that you have an account that you can reference for those products. Not only is saving receipts or starting an account helpful for, if you have to make returns, which again, I'm a strong advocate in making returns. If the item did not work for you, I strongly encourage returning. Additionally, if you wanted to repurchase that item, it's going to be easier to find if you have it saved in your account somewhere. Some different keywords or trigger words to look for if you're researching different items online. You want to have things that are, if you're trying to, again, utilize, getting visual or utilizing some of that vertical space, look for items that are stackable, they're hanging, maybe they can be mounted. You also want things that are accessible. Maybe they are handled, they're rolling or portable. So again, thinking of that accessibility piece, again, the stacking that offers, a little bit more freedom to use your space and optimize it. All right, so us organizers love the Container Store. Why do we love it? Because it's a hub for almost every organizing supply you can imagine. And I posted here some of our favorite different brands that I like to use from the Container Store. Okay, so make note of these brands, especially if you see the Home Edit. If you haven't seen the popular Netflix show with the Home Edit, they're a big one now with Container Store. So they are exclusive to Container Store. However, all of these brands, with the exception of the Home Edit, you can find at different stores, including Amazon, Target, Bed Bath & Beyond, okay? So these are some different trusted brands that I know they have durable products. Still, read your reviews. Not all products are created equally. Let's talk a little bit more about acrylic. So these are trending right now, and the acrylic material tends to be more durable than plastic. One thing to keep in mind is that while it is, clear, it keeps things visual, and it appears nicely, is that it can start to leave smudges. So if you've got kids and they're going in there and they're smudging their fingers all over it, keep that in mind. Turntables, that's another trend that people love. And you can use these in all different spaces. We've used turntables for crafting supplies. It doesn't have to be necessarily just spices. We've used them in bathrooms for toiletries, etc. Especially now that you're seeing more and more acrylics to help with or assist with your bathroom, or excuse me, bathroom, and not only bathroom organizing, but also even in your fridge. So there's different fridge and freezer bins. Again, these acrylics are trending, and you don't necessarily have to go to or order from the Container Store. So we know in Grand Rapids here, we don't have a Container Store. It's a distance away and can be difficult to make some of those returns if you're not satisfied or the product doesn't work for you. So again, iDesign, M-Design, these are two different brands that make acrylic products that I've tested, I've used, we prefer them. And you can find these also as well at Bed Bath & Beyond, Target, Amazon, order online or in the store. Another trend, we know that acrylics are trending thanks to the home edit, but we're also seeing Marie Kondo is making a comeback, or maybe she never went away. She was really popular for a while, but she's back. She came back with the Netflix show, and she now has her own collections over at the Container Store. So you're going to start seeing more of these. She uses quite a bit of bamboo, some ceramics, things of that nature, sort of with that Japanese inspiration. So again, I encourage you to check out her collection. Another piece is, maybe you aren't going to shop at the Container Store, but it's a great hub or a resource for looking at photos to get inspired. So even if you're maybe not going to purchase from there, I want you to check out their website, check out their Instagram. People post pictures on there, and I think it's hashtag TCS or Get Contained, and you can get inspired of different ideas of how to use products, create a visual, add it to your Pinterest board, so again, a great way to get inspired and, get some visual with it. Some takeaways for today. I want you to know stuff does get in the way of us being our best selves, but it doesn't have to. And hopefully you've taken some tools, some techniques today that speak to you and will work for you. Again, I want to remind you, there's no one size fits all to getting organized. My stuff's going to look different than your stuff. You may organize different than I organize, and that's okay. As long as you're making progress, figure out what works well for you. Additionally, it's okay to ask for help. That's something too. Again, choosing somebody non-judgmental, non-biased, somebody that maybe will give you, that compassion you need, but also a little bit of tough love. Furthermore, hire a pro. Consider hiring a pro and bringing someone in who you won't regret it. It's a huge investment, and you're going to feel a weight lifted. We've helped a lot of people make their house a home, and we'd love to help you too. Thank you again so much for virtually visiting with me and watching this presentation. Happy organizing. And again, if you have questions, if you need help, do not hesitate to reach out. You can visit my website at moxielifeorganizing.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, so you can find me there. And if you liked this presentation today, I would love for you to increase our 5-star customer rating and leave me a review on Google. Again, thank you for coming today, and happy organizing.